I pressed my palms against the cracked Formica counter, staring at the handwritten list Rebecca had slid across to me during my interview. 23 years old, fresh out of a failed semester at community college and desperate enough to take any job that would pay rent. This one paid well, suspiciously well for a gas station in the middle of the Nevada desert. "These are not suggestions," Rebecca said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen things that aged her beyond her 50-something years. "These are absolutes. Break them, and I cannot help you." The desert stop sat 40 miles from the nearest town along Route 375, the so-called extraterrestrial highway. Tourists stopped during daylight hours, snapping photos and buying alien-themed keychains. But at night, the place belonged to something else entirely. I read through the list again, my stomach tightening with each line. Rule 1. Between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., the bathroom doors must remain locked. Do not open them for any reason, regardless of what you hear. Rule 2. If you see a woman in a white dress standing by pump 7, do not acknowledge her. She will leave when the sun rises. Rule 3. The radio behind the counter must stay on AM 840, even when it broadcasts static. Never change the station. Rule 4. If someone enters wearing sunglasses after midnight, serve them immediately and accept whatever they offer as payment. Rule 5. Do not investigate the storage room if you hear knocking from inside. The door stays closed until dawn. Rule 6. If the lights flicker 3 times in succession, close your eyes and count to 30 before opening them. Is this some kind of test? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. See if the new guy scares easily? Rebecca's expression never changed. I need you to repeat each rule back to me, Marcus. Word for word. I went through them, stumbling over the specifics but getting the general idea across. The whole thing felt like an elaborate prank, the kind of hazing ritual small-town businesses inflicted on outsiders. I had driven past this place a dozen times on road trips, never giving it a second thought. Just another lonely building in an endless stretch of desert. The last person who worked nights, Rebecca continued, gathering her papers. His name was Daniel Torres. He lasted 3 weeks. Did he quit? He disappeared. She said it matter-of-factly, like she was commenting on the weather. His car was found 20 miles down the highway, engine running, driver's door open. They never found him. I should have walked out then. Should have gotten back in my beat-up Honda and driven straight back to Reno. But desperation makes you stupid, and I needed this job. The pay was 3 times what I would make anywhere else, and they were offering it to me without asking too many questions about my thin resume or the gaps in my employment history. When do I start? I heard myself say. Tonight, 10 p.m. I will stay until midnight to show you the procedures. Rebecca stood, smoothing down her company vest. Follow the rules, Marcus. All of them. Every time. That was 6 days ago. Now on my 7th night, I leaned against the counter and watched the sun disappear behind the distant mountains. The desert stop transformed after dark. During the day, it was just a shabby convenience store with faded linoleum floors and flickering fluorescent lights. But as night fell, the shadows grew longer and deeper, and the desert silence pressed against the windows like something alive. My first night had been uneventful. I followed the rules to the letter, mostly because I was too nervous to do anything else. I locked the bathroom doors at exactly 1 a.m. and unlocked them at 3 a.m. The radio stayed on AM 840, broadcasting nothing but static with occasional bursts of what might have been voices speaking in a language I did not recognize. No one came in wearing sunglasses. The lights did not flicker. The storage room stayed quiet. By the 3rd night, I had started to relax. Maybe this was just a weird job with weird policies. Maybe Daniel Torres had quit and made up a story to cover his sudden departure. Maybe Rebecca was just eccentric and the rules were her way of maintaining control. Then came the 4th night. I was restocking the snack aisle around 11:30 p.m. when I noticed her. A woman in a white dress standing perfectly still beside pump 7. I had not heard a car pull up, had not seen headlights sweep across the parking lot. She was just there, as if she had materialized from the darkness itself. The dress looked old-fashioned, something from a different era, with long sleeves and a high collar. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, and even from inside the store, I could tell she was staring directly at me. Rule 2 echoed in my mind. If you see a woman in a white dress standing by pump 7, Do not acknowledge her. I forced myself to look away, to focus on arranging bags of chips with hands that had started to shake. When I glanced back, she had moved closer to the window. Her face was pale, almost luminous in the harsh parking lot lights. Her eyes were completely black, no whites visible at all. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to run, to get in my car and drive until the sun came up. But something kept me rooted in place. Maybe it was pride or stubbornness or the simple fact that I needed this job too much to abandon it. For 3 hours she stood there, sometimes by the pump, sometimes closer to the building, but always watching. I busied myself with tasks, avoiding the windows as much as possible. The few times I accidentally caught sight of her, she was in a different position, always closer, though I never saw her move. At exactly 5:47 a.m., just as the sky began to lighten in the east, I looked out and she was gone. Rebecca arrived at 6 for the morning handover. She took one look at my face and nodded slowly. "You saw her?" It was not a question. "What is she?" I asked, my voice rough from hours of silence. "I do not know," Rebecca said, counting the register with practiced efficiency. "She has been appearing for as long as I have worked here. 15 years now. She never does anything, never tries to come inside. She just watches. What happens if you acknowledge her?" Rebecca's hand stilled over the cash drawer. "The last person who did that was a clerk named Sarah Winters. This was before my time, but the manager before me told me about it." Sarah waved at the woman in the white dress, smiled at her like she was just another customer. She closed the drawer with more force than necessary. They found Sarah 3 days later in the desert, 10 miles from any road. The coroner said she had been walking in circles until she collapsed from dehydration, even though her car was parked right outside the store with a full tank of gas and bottles of water in the trunk. I felt cold despite the desert heat already building outside. "Follow the rules," Rebecca said again, her tone softer now. "They exist for a reason, Marcus. Every single one of them." The 5th night, I heard the knocking. It started at 2:17 a.m., a steady rhythm coming from the storage room. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause, over and over again. I stood behind the counter staring at the storage room door, Rule 5 playing on repeat in my mind. Do not investigate if you hear knocking from inside. The knocking continued for 45 minutes. Sometimes it sounded like knuckles on wood. Sometimes it sounded like metal scraping against metal. Sometimes it sounded like something much larger and heavier throwing itself against the door from the inside. I stayed behind the counter, my hands gripping the edge so hard my knuckles turned white. The few customers who came in during those 45 minutes did not seem to notice the sound. They bought their gas and snacks, made small talk about the weather, and drove away as if nothing was wrong. When the knocking finally stopped, the silence felt worse somehow. The 6th night brought the lights. At 1:33 a.m., while I was restocking the cooler, the fluorescent lights flickered once. I froze, counting in my head. They flickered a second time, then a third. I slammed my eyes shut and started counting. 1, 2, 3. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I heard something move through the store. Footsteps that did not quite sound right. Too heavy in some places and too light in others. Something brushed past me, close enough that I felt the displacement of air against my skin. The temperature dropped so suddenly that I could see my breath even with my eyes closed. 28, 29, 30. I opened my eyes. The store looked exactly as it had before, but the air felt different somehow. Charged like the moment before a lightning strike. I finished restocking the cooler with trembling hands and spent the rest of the night behind the counter, watching the clock crawl toward dawn. Now, on my 7th night, I arrived at 10 p.m. to find Rebecca waiting with an expression I had not seen before. Worry mixed with something else. Resignation maybe, or acceptance. "We need to talk before I leave," she said, gesturing to the small break room in the back. "There is something you need to know." The break room was barely large enough for a table and 2 chairs. Rebecca closed the door behind us and sat down heavily, suddenly looking every one of her years. "The Desert Stop is not just a gas station," she began without preamble. "It was built here deliberately in this exact spot for a specific purpose." I sat across from her, my stomach knotting with dread. In 1952, something happened in this desert. The government was testing weapons, conducting experiments, doing things they never made public. She pulled a yellowed newspaper clipping from her pocket and slid it across the table. The headline read, "Unexplained Phenomena Reported Along Route 375. Military Denies Involvement." "They opened something," Rebecca continued. "A door, a portal, a tear in reality. I do not know the technical term, but they opened it, and they could not close it completely. The best they could do was contain it, build a structure over it to keep things from coming through." "This place," I said slowly, understanding dawning. "The desert stop is built on top of whatever they opened." She nodded. "The rules are not arbitrary. They are based on 50 years of trial and error, of learning how to coexist with whatever exists on the other side. The woman in the white dress, the knocking in the storage room, the things that happen when the lights flicker, they are all symptoms of the barrier weakening, of things trying to push through from the other side. Why are you telling me this now? Because tonight is different." Rebecca stood and walked to the small window that looked out over the parking lot. "Every 7 days, the barrier thins further. The patterns repeat, but they intensify. Tonight will be worse than anything you have experienced so far." My mouth went dry. "How much worse?" "That depends on whether you follow the rules." She turned back to me. "But there is one more rule I need to give you, Marcus. One that only applies on the 7th night." She pulled out a fresh piece of paper and wrote in the same careful handwriting as the original list. "Rule 7. At exactly 2:22 a.m., someone will enter the store wearing a uniform identical to yours. They will try to convince you to leave. Do not listen. Do not leave your post. Do not let them behind the counter." "What happens if I do?" I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know the answer. "Then they take your place," and Rebecca said simply. "And you take theirs on the other side of the barrier." That is what happened to Daniel Torres. He broke Rule 7. She checked her watch. "It is almost midnight. I have to go. Remember, Marcus, no matter what you see tonight, no matter what you hear, follow the rules. All of them." After she left, I locked the door behind her and stood in the center of the empty store. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in their harsh artificial glow. The radio behind the counter crackled with static, occasionally forming patterns that almost sounded like words. The first hour passed slowly. A few cars stopped for gas, their drivers bleary-eyed and focused on getting back on the road. I served them mechanically, my mind churning through everything Rebecca had told me. At 1 a.m. I locked the bathroom doors as required. Almost immediately I heard scratching from inside, like fingernails dragging across tile. Then voices, muffled and indistinct, speaking in urgent tones. I walked away, forcing myself not to listen, not to wonder what was making those sounds. At 1:15 a.m., the woman in the white dress appeared at pump 7. But tonight was different. She was not alone. Behind her, barely visible in the shadows, were others. More women in white dresses, all standing perfectly still, all watching me with those black, bottomless eyes. I kept my eyes on the counter, on the register, on anything except those windows. But I could feel their presence like a physical weight, pressing against the glass, testing the boundaries. At 1:45 a.m., the knocking started in the storage room. But tonight it did not sound like knocking at all. It sounded like something trying to break through, like wood splintering and metal groaning under impossible pressure. The door shook in its frame, the handle twisting back and forth violently. I gripped the counter and recited the rules in my mind like a prayer. Do not investigate the storage room if you hear knocking from inside. At 2 a.m., the lights flickered. Once, twice, 3 times. I slammed my eyes shut and started counting. The temperature plummeted. I could hear my breath forming crystals in the air. Something moved through the store. Multiple somethings, their footsteps echoing off the linoleum in discordant rhythms. One of them stopped right in front of me. I could feel its presence, could smell something acrid and wrong, like ozone mixed with decay. Hot breath ghosted across my face, too close, as if something was leaning in to examine me. 28. 29:30. I opened my eyes to find the store empty again, but everything had shifted slightly. The displays were in different positions. The clock on the wall showed a time that did not match my watch. The radio was now broadcasting clear voices speaking in reverse. At 2:22 a.m. exactly, the door opened. A young man walked in wearing the same uniform vest as mine, the same khaki pants, the same name tag. But the name tag read Daniel Torres. He looked exactly as I imagined I must look, tired, scared, desperately trying to hold it together. He walked to the counter and stopped on the customer side, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Your shift is over," he said, his voice perfectly calm. "I am here to relieve you." Every instinct screamed at me to agree, to run for the door and never look back. But Rebecca's words echoed in my mind. "Do not listen. Do not leave your post. Do not let them behind the counter." "No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "My shift ends at 6 a.m., not before." Daniel, or whatever was wearing his face, smiled. "You do not understand. You are not supposed to be here. I am supposed to be here. There was a mistake and now it needs to be corrected." "No," I repeated, taking a step back to put more distance between us. "I am not leaving." His smile widened, becoming something that no longer looked human. "It is so much easier if you just agree." The others fought at first too, but eventually they all understood. Eventually they all walked through that door. He pointed to the storage room, where the knocking had reached a fevered pitch. "Once you go through," he continued, his voice taking on a sing-song quality, "you will understand everything. You will see what we see. You will know what we know. It is beautiful, Marcus, so much better than this place, than this world that does not want you, that never wanted you." For a moment, I almost believed him. Part of me wondered if it would be so bad, stepping through that door into whatever waited on the other side. At least then I would know, would understand what had been haunting this place for 70 years. But then I thought about Daniel Torres, about his empty car on the highway, about Sarah Winters walking in circles in the desert until she died, about every person who had broken the rules and never came back. "Get out," I said, pointing toward the exit. "My shift is not over. You do not belong here." The thing wearing Daniel's face stopped smiling. Its features began to shift, becoming fluid and wrong. "You will regret this," it said, its voice dropping to something inhuman. "Every night I will come back. Every night I will ask again. And eventually you will say yes. They always do." It turned and walked toward the exit, but before passing through the door it looked back. For just a moment I saw Daniel's face again. Not the thing pretending to be him, but the real Daniel. His eyes were filled with such profound sadness and fear that I had to look away. Then he was gone, and the door swung shut behind him. The rest of the night passed in a blur of mounting terror. The women in white dresses pressed against the windows, their black eyes never blinking. The knocking in the storage room grew so loud I was certain the door would splinter apart. The lights flickered constantly, sometimes staying off for minutes at a time, leaving me in darkness with only the static-filled radio for company. But I followed the rules. Every single one of them. When Rebecca arrived at 6 a.m., I was still standing behind the counter, my hands shaking, my uniform soaked with sweat despite the desert cold. She took one look at me and nodded, the same way she had after my first encounter with the woman in white. "You survived the 7th night," she said simply. "Not everyone does." "He said he would come back," I told her, my voice raw. "Every night he said he would ask again." "He will," Rebecca confirmed, beginning her count of the register. "That is part of the job, Marcus. Part of maintaining the barrier. We stand here, we follow the rules, and we refuse them when they try to take our place." "For how long?" She paused, her hand stilling over the cash drawer. "I have been doing this for 15 years. The woman before me did it for 12. The man before her did it for 8 before he finally broke and walked through that storage room door." "And if I quit?" I asked. "If I just walk away?" "Then they will find someone else to stand guard," Rebecca said. "Someone who might not be as strong, who might not follow the rules as carefully, someone who might let whatever is on the other side break through." She met my eyes. "This place exists for a reason, Marcus. We exist here for a reason. The barrier has to be maintained." I thought about that as I drove home through the desert sunrise. Thought about the weight of Rebecca's words. About the responsibility that had somehow fallen to me. I was just a 23-year-old dropout with no prospects and no direction. How had I become a guardian against whatever lurked on the other side of reality? But as I pulled into my apartment complex, I knew I would go back tonight. And the night after that. Not because I wanted to, but because someone had to. Because the rules had to be followed. And the barrier had to be maintained, and sometimes ordinary people have to do extraordinary things simply because no one else will. The desert stop would be waiting when darkness fell. And so would I. I did not sleep that day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel Torres standing at my counter, his face shifting between human and something else entirely. I saw the women in white dresses pressing against the windows, their black eyes reflecting nothing. I heard the knocking from the storage room, that relentless rhythm that seemed to echo in my bones. By the time evening came, I was exhausted but wired, running on adrenaline and too much coffee. I arrived at the desert stop at 9:45 p.m., 15 minutes early. Rebecca was behind the counter, but she was not alone. An older man sat at the customer table nursing a cup of coffee. He looked to be in his 60s with weathered skin and gray hair that might have once been black. When I entered, his eyes tracked me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "Marcus," Rebecca said, "this is Joseph Clearwater. He worked the night shift here before I took over the day management." Joseph stood and extended his hand. His grip was firm, his palm calloused. "Rebecca tells me you survived your 7th night." "Barely," I admitted. He smiled, but there was no humor in it. "The 7th night is always the hardest. It is when they test you, when they see if you are strong enough to hold the line." He gestured to the empty chair. "Sit. We have 20 minutes before Rebecca leaves. I want to tell you something that might help you understand what you are dealing with." I sat, glancing at Rebecca for confirmation. She nodded. "In 1952, Joseph began. The government was not just testing weapons out here. They were trying to punch holes in reality itself. They wanted to access other dimensions, other planes of existence. They thought they could harness energy from beyond our world, create weapons that would make nuclear bombs look like firecrackers." He took a sip of his coffee, his eyes distant. "They succeeded. For exactly 47 seconds, they opened a doorway to somewhere else. But what came through in those 47 seconds changed everything." "What came through?" I asked. "Them," Joseph said simply. "The things you have been seeing. The woman in white, the entities in the storage room, whatever wears Daniel Torres's face, they are all refugees or invaders or something in between. When the doorway closed, it did not close completely. It could not. Too much had already passed through, and those things could not be sent back. So they built this place to contain them," I said, remembering what Rebecca had told me. "Not quite." Joseph leaned forward. "They built this place to keep the door from opening any wider. You see, the things on the other side are still trying to break through. Every night they push against the barrier, looking for weaknesses, testing the boundaries. The rules we follow, the routines we maintain, they reinforce the barrier. Our presence here, our refusal to give in, somehow strengthens the seal." "But why us?" I asked. "Why do regular people have to do this? Why not the government or the military or whoever opened that door in the first place?" Joseph's smile was bitter. "Because they tried that first. For 10 years they stationed trained personnel here, military guards, intelligence agents, people who were supposed to be prepared for anything. But something about their training, their discipline, their very military nature, it made them rigid. When the entities tested them, they broke. They followed orders without understanding why, and that was not enough." He stood and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening desert. "Then they tried scientists, researchers who could document and analyze what was happening. That was worse. The entities played on their curiosity, showed them things that no human should see, and drove them mad trying to understand the incomprehensible. So they started hiring regular people," Rebecca said softly. "People who were desperate enough to take the job but flexible enough to adapt. People who could follow the rules without needing to understand every detail. People like us," I said. Joseph turned back to face me. "Exactly. We are not special, Marcus. We are not chosen or gifted. We are just ordinary people who happen to be in the right place at the right time, willing to stand between our world and whatever wants to break through." He paused. "But that ordinariness is our strength. We accept the impossible because we have no framework that tells us we cannot." Rebecca checked her watch. "It is almost 10. I need to do the handover." Joseph gathered his coat. "I will leave you to it. But Marcus, remember this, the entities will keep testing you. Every night will bring something new, something designed to make you break the rules or abandon your post. Do not let them win." After they both left, I locked the door and began my routine. Check the register, restock the shelves, start a fresh pot of coffee. The familiar tasks helped calm my nerves, gave me something concrete to focus on. The first customer of the night arrived at 10:47 p.m. A woman in her 30s, road-weary and anxious to get back on the highway. She bought coffee and a sandwich, made small talk about the weather, and left. Normal, human, real. The second customer came at 11:23 p.m., a truck driver hauling equipment to California. He filled his tank, bought energy drinks and beef jerky, complained about traffic in Las Vegas. Also normal, but at 11:58 p.m., just before midnight, a third customer entered. He was tall and thin, wearing a black suit that looked expensive but somehow wrong, as if it had been tailored for a body that was not quite human. His face was ordinary, forgettable even, but his eyes were completely silver, reflecting the fluorescent lights like mirrors. Rule 4 flashed through my mind. If someone enters wearing sunglasses after midnight, serve them immediately and accept whatever they offer as payment. But this man was not wearing sunglasses. His silver eyes were fully visible, unblinking, fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. He walked to the counter without browsing, without looking at the shelves or displays. His movements were fluid but wrong, like watching a video where the frame rate did not quite match reality. "Coffee," he said. His voice was normal, human, but it seemed to come from somewhere other than his mouth. Black. I poured the coffee with shaking hands, my mind racing through the rules. None of them covered this. None of them told me what to do with a customer who was clearly not human, but also not specifically mentioned in any rule. I placed the cup on the counter. $2. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a handful of coins. But when he placed them on the counter, I saw they were not American currency. They were silver, intricately carved with symbols I did not recognize, warm to the touch as if they had been held against skin for a long time. "I cannot accept these," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need U.S. currency." The man tilted his head, and for a moment his entire form seemed to flicker, as if I was seeing multiple versions of him overlapping. "The rules say you must accept whatever payment is offered." "That is Rule 4, I said, remembering Rebecca's emphasis on knowing the rules exactly. "And Rule 4 only applies to people wearing sunglasses after midnight." "You are not wearing sunglasses." Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. "You know the rules well." "I know them perfectly." He studied me for a long moment, those silver eyes unblinking. Then he reached into another pocket and pulled out a crisp $5 bill. "Perhaps this will suffice." I took the money, examined it carefully. It looked real, felt real. I put it in the register and counted out his change. He took the coffee and walked to one of the small tables near the window, sitting down as if settling in for a long stay. For the next 2 hours, he remained there. He did not drink the coffee. He did not move. He simply sat and watched me with those terrible silver eyes. At 1 a.m., I locked the bathroom doors as required. The scratching started immediately, but tonight it was accompanied by voices. Clear voices speaking English, calling my name. "Marcus, please," a woman's voice pleaded. "I need help. Please open the door." I walked away, but the voice followed me. "Marcus, I am hurt. I am bleeding. Please, I need a phone. I need to call for help." The voice sounded so real, so desperate, that my hand actually moved toward the bathroom key before I caught myself. I forced my feet to carry me back to the counter, as far from the bathrooms as I could get. The man in the black suit watched all of this without expression. At 1:15 a.m., the woman in white dress appeared at pump 7, but tonight she was not alone. The others were there too, more than I had seen before. Dozens of them, all wearing identical white dresses, all with the same black eyes, forming a semicircle around the building. They stood perfectly still, but as I watched, they began to move in unison. Not walking, but gliding, their feet never quite touching the ground. They circled the building slowly, maintaining their formation, always watching through the windows. The man in the black suit finally moved. He stood and walked to the window, watching the women with what might have been curiosity. Then he turned back to me. "They are patient," he said. "They have been here for 70 years. They can wait 70 more. What do they want?" I asked before I could stop myself. "The same thing we all want, to go home." He placed his untouched coffee on the counter. "But home is closed to them now. So they wait and they watch and they hope that someday someone will be weak enough to let them in. Are you one of them?" He considered the question. "I am something different. A messenger, perhaps. A neutral party. I exist in the spaces between and I watch what happens when worlds collide." He moved toward the door. "You are doing better than most, Marcus. Better than Daniel Torres, certainly. But the real tests are still ahead." "Wait," I called as he reached the door. "What tests?" He paused, his hand on the handle. "They will offer you things. Not just Daniel's face and his promises. They will offer you knowledge, power, freedom from fear. They will show you wonders that no human has ever seen. And eventually they will offer you the one thing you want most in all the world." "How do you know what I want?" His smile was sad. "Because they know. They have been watching you since the moment you accepted this job. They know your fears, your desires, your regrets. And they will use all of it against you." Then he was gone, slipping out into the night where the women in white dresses continued their slow circle around the building. At 2 a.m. the lights did not flicker. Instead, the power cut out entirely. The sudden darkness was absolute. The fluorescent lights, the cooler displays, the security monitors, everything went black. Even the red glow of the exit signs disappeared. The only light came from the moon filtering through the windows, casting everything in shades of silver and black. The radio behind the counter continued to play, running on battery backup. But the static had resolved into something else, music. Old music from the 1950s. A woman's voice singing about lost love and empty promises. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating dust motes floating in the still air. I swept it across the store, checking the aisles, the windows, the doors. Everything looked normal. Empty. Safe. Then I heard footsteps. They came from the storage room, heavy and deliberate. The doorknob turned slowly and the door began to open. Rule 5. Do not investigate the storage room if you hear knocking from inside. The door stays closed until dawn. But I had not opened the door. It was opening on its own. I backed up against the counter, my phone's light trained on that opening door. Through the widening crack I could see only darkness, deeper and more absolute than the darkness in the store. The footsteps continued, coming closer. Whatever was in there was walking toward the door, toward me. My hand found the phone on the wall behind the counter. I lifted it, prepared to call Rebecca, but there was no dial tone. The line was dead. The storage room door swung fully open. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against that impossible darkness. It was human-shaped, but wrong in ways I could not immediately identify. Too tall, perhaps, or too thin. Its proportions did not quite match what a person should look like. It took one step forward, into the store. The moonlight caught its face, and I had to suppress a scream. It was me, not wearing my face like Daniel Torres had worn his. This was me, exactly as I appeared, down to the uniform vest and the scar on my left hand from a childhood accident. It even moved like me, with the same slight limp from a knee injury I had sustained playing football in high school. "Hello, Marcus," it said with my voice. I could not speak, could not move, could only stare at this impossible reflection. "I know what you are thinking," it continued, walking closer. "You are thinking this is another trick, another test. But it is not." It spread its hands in a gesture I recognized as my own. "I am you. Or rather, I am what you could become." "That is not possible," I managed to say. "Is it not?" The other Marcus smiled my smile. "You have seen so much impossibility in the past week. Why is this so hard to believe? Time is not as linear as you think, Marcus. The barrier does not just separate spaces, it separates moments. Past, present, future, they all exist simultaneously on the other side." It walked to the counter, standing exactly where I had stood countless times this week. "I came here to warn you, to tell you what happens if you continue down this path." "I am not listening to this," I said, but I did not move. "In 3 months," it continued, ignoring my protest, "something will happen. Something that will test you beyond anything you have experienced so far. And you will fail, Marcus. You will break the rules not because you are weak, but because you will think you are being clever. You will think you have found a loophole. Stop. They will take someone you care about, someone real, someone human, and they will put them in that storage room." The other Marcus pointed toward the still open door. "You will hear them screaming, begging for help. And you will have to choose. Follow Rule 5 and let them die, or break the rule and save them." My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. "You are lying." I wish I was. The sadness in its voice, my voice, sounded genuine. "You will choose to break the rule. You will open that door. And what comes through will not just take you. It will use you to break down the entire barrier. 70 years of sacrifice, of people standing guard, all undone because you thought love was more important than the rules. If that is true, I said, my mind racing, if you are really me from the future, then you came here to change it. To warn me so I do not make that mistake. The other Marcus shook its head. I came here because they sent me. Because this is another test, Marcus. They want to see if you will abandon your post right now, convinced that your future self is trying to save you, or if you will stay, knowing that failure might be inevitable. The lights suddenly flickered back on. The fluorescent bulbs hummed to life, flooding the store with their harsh glow. I blinked against the sudden brightness, and when my eyes adjusted, the other Marcus was gone. The storage room door was closed. The radio had returned to its normal static, but on the counter, exactly where the other Marcus had been standing, was a single object. My class ring from high school. The one I had lost 3 years ago, the one I had turned my apartment upside down looking for. I picked it up with shaking hands. It was real, solid, warm, as if it had just been taken off someone's finger. On the inside, my initials were engraved just as I remembered. MJK. I slipped it into my pocket and checked the time. 2:18 a.m., 4 minutes before Daniel Torres would appear. I spent those 4 minutes trying to calm my breathing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was that really a future version of myself? Or was it another entity? Another trick designed to make me question everything? At exactly 2:22 a.m., the door opened. Daniel Torres walked in wearing my uniform. But tonight he did not bother with pretense. His face kept shifting, cycling through different versions of itself, young, old, rotted, pristine like a television flipping through channels. "You met yourself," he said, his voice overlapping with dozens of other voices. "How did that feel?" "It felt like another lie," I said, though I was not sure I believed it. "Was it?" Daniel moved toward the counter, but he did not try to come around it this time. He simply stood on the other side, his face finally settling on one version. The one from what must have been his driver's license photo, young and hopeful and alive. "Everything they tell you is true, Marcus. Every warning, every vision, every test. The question is whether you can accept the truth and still do what needs to be done." "I will not leave my post," I said. "Tonight, no. Tomorrow night, probably not. But eventually," he shrugged. "Everyone breaks. Everyone finds their limit. The only question is what breaks them. Not everyone. Rebecca has been here 15 years. Rebecca," Daniel said, and something like pity crossed his face. "You do not know everything about Rebecca, Marcus. You do not know what she sacrificed to maintain this barrier, what she gave up to keep standing at her post. What did she sacrifice? Ask her yourself," Daniel said. "If she will tell you. If she can tell you." He turned toward the door. 3 more hours until dawn, Marcus. 3 more hours of holding the line. Can you make it?" "Yes, good." He paused at the door. "Because tomorrow night will be worse. And the night after that will be worse still. Until eventually, you reach the night where worse becomes impossible. Where the only choice is to break or to become something other than human yourself." He left, and I was alone again with the static of the radio and the weight of too many questions. The rest of the night passed without major incident. The women in white dresses eventually dispersed as dawn approached. The scratching and voices from the bathrooms faded. The storage room remained quiet, though I could not bring myself to look at it without thinking of that other Marcus, that warning about someone I cared about. When Rebecca arrived at 6 a.m., she found me sitting behind the counter, my hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee, staring at nothing. "Rough night?" she asked, beginning her routine count of the register. "They are all rough," I said. "But Rebecca, I need to ask you something." She paused, her hand stilling over the cash drawer. "What is it?" "Daniel Torres said you sacrificed something to keep doing this." "What did he mean?" Rebecca was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I had a daughter, Emily. She was 8 years old when I started working here." "Had?" "She is not dead," Rebecca said quickly. "But she might as well be. You see, one night about 7 years ago, the entities tried a new approach. They did not try to tempt me or trick me. They just took her. Pulled her into the storage room when she came to visit me during a day shift. My blood ran cold. But you said to never open that door." "I did not." Rebecca's eyes were wet, but no tears fell. I followed the rules, Marcus. I kept that door closed even though I could hear my daughter screaming on the other side. Even though I could hear them hurting her, changing her, turning her into something else. Rebecca, they gave her back 3 days later. Pushed her back through the door during someone else's shift. But it was not Emily anymore. It looked like her, sounded like her, but something fundamental had changed. She did not recognize me. She called me the woman and asked when her real mother was coming to get her. She finally looked at me and I saw the depth of pain in her eyes. That is the cost of holding the line, Marcus. That is what they can take from us. And they did it to show me that no sacrifice is too great for them, that they will use anything and anyone to break us. Why did you stay? I asked. After that, why did you keep working here? Because if I left, Emily's sacrifice would mean nothing. The barrier would weaken and more people would suffer what she suffered. Because this is the job, Marcus. We stand between our world and theirs, and sometimes the cost is everything we hold dear. She finished counting the register and closed the drawer with careful precision. Now you know. Now you understand what you have truly committed to. If you want to quit, I will not blame you. I will find someone else to take your place. I thought about the class ring in my pocket, about the warning from the other Marcus, about Emily who was and was not Rebecca's daughter anymore. No, I said, I am not quitting. Why not? Because you are right. If we do not stand here, who will? If we do not follow the rules, who will maintain the barrier? I stood gathering my things. I will see you tonight at 10. Rebecca nodded and I thought I saw something like approval in her expression. The 14th night is coming, Marcus. 2 weeks. That is when the cycle resets, when everything intensifies. Be ready. I drove home through the sunrise, my mind full of too many thoughts. I had been working at the desert stop for 8 nights. 8 nights of increasing strangeness, of encounters with things that should not exist, of tests I barely passed, and apparently I had 6 more nights before it all got worse. I slept fitfully that day. My dreams filled with women in white dresses and doors opening onto darkness. When I woke in the late afternoon, I found myself touching the class ring in my pocket, wondering if it was real or if I had imagined the whole encounter. But the ring was there, solid and real, which meant at least part of what I had experienced was true. The 9th, 10th, and 11th nights followed similar patterns. Each night brought new variations on the tests. The women in white dresses grew bolder, sometimes pressing their faces against the glass, leaving no fog from breath, no prints from contact. The knocking in the storage room developed rhythms that seemed almost like language. The lights flickered more frequently, and each time I closed my eyes and counted to 30, I heard more things moving through the store during those seconds of darkness. Daniel Torres came every night at 2:22 a.m., but his approach changed. Sometimes he pleaded, sometimes he threatened, sometimes he simply stood at the counter and stared at me with eyes that held too much knowledge. I refused him every time, and every time he left with that same warning. Eventually, you will break. On the 12th night, I met another worker. She arrived just before midnight, pulling up in a battered sedan. She was young, maybe 19 or 20, with dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. She walked in and headed straight for the counter. "You are the new night clerk," she said. It was not a question. "Marcus," I introduced myself. "And you are?" "Jennifer. I work at the truck stop 40 miles south." She glanced around the store, her body language tense. "Rebecca called me, said you might need someone to talk to who understands." "There are more places like this?" Jennifer laughed, but there was no humor in it. "There are 7 that I know of, all along this stretch of desert. Each one built over a weak point in the barrier. Each one with its own rules, its own guardians." She grabbed a cup and poured herself coffee. "But this place is special. This is where it all started, where they first opened the door. Joseph told me about that. About 1952. Then you know the basics." She leaned against the counter, studying me. "But did he tell you about the convergence?" "The what?" "Every 14 nights, the barrier weakens significantly. All the thin places, all 7 stations, they synchronize somehow. What happens at one affects all the others." She took a sip of coffee. "Rebecca said tonight is your 12th night, which means your 14th is coming. That is when you will face your real test." I thought every night was a test. Those are just preliminaries. Warm-ups. On the 14th night, they bring out everything. Every entity, every trick, every weakness they have identified in you over the past 2 weeks. Jennifer's expression was grim. I have been working at my station for 2 years. I have survived 28 14th nights. Each one was worse than the last. How do you handle it? By remembering why we do this. She finished her coffee and set the cup down. My younger brother disappeared out here when I was 15. Search and rescue never found him. Said he probably just ran away from home. But I knew better. I knew something took him. She met my eyes. I do this job so that what happened to him does not happen to anyone else. What is your reason, Marcus? I thought about that. About why I had stayed after seeing impossible things. After being warned about the cost after learning what had happened to Emily. I do not know yet, I admitted. Maybe I just do not like the idea of these things winning. Jennifer smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. That is as good a reason as any. She headed toward the door. Good luck on your 14th night, Marcus. Follow the rules, trust your instincts, and remember, they can only win if you let them. After she left, I felt strangely comforted. It helped, knowing there were others out there, other ordinary people standing guard at other lonely outposts. We were not alone in this fight. The 13th night was quiet. Suspiciously quiet. The woman in white dress appeared, but she stood far back from the building, just watching. The bathrooms remained silent after I locked them. The storage room barely made a sound. Even Daniel Torres seemed subdued when he appeared at 2:22 a.m., offering his usual plea to take his place, but without the intensity of previous nights. It felt like the calm before a storm. On the 14th night, I arrived an hour early. Rebecca was waiting with Joseph Clearwater and 2 other people I had never met. An older woman with steel gray hair and a middle-aged man wearing a trucker's cap. Marcus, Rebecca said. This is Margaret and Tom. They work at 2 of the other stations. We came for the 14th night, Margaret said. Her voice was rough, like she had spent years shouting to be heard. Rebecca asked us to be here in case you need support. We will be in the parking lot, Tom added. We cannot come inside during your shift. That would violate your station's protocols. But we will be close. If something goes wrong, if you need help, we will know. How will you know? I asked. Joseph answered. The barrier connects all 7 stations. On convergence nights, we can feel when one of the others is in trouble. It is like a pressure change or a shift in temperature. Hard to describe, but unmistakable once you have experienced it. Rebecca handed me a new list. This one had only a single rule written in red ink. Rule 8. On the 14th night, you will be offered a choice. Choose correctly and the cycle resets. Choose wrong and you become part of what you have been fighting. What choice? I asked. We do not know, Rebecca admitted. It is different for everyone. But Marcus, listen to me carefully. When the choice comes, do not overthink it. Trust your instincts. Trust what you have learned these past 2 weeks. After they left, I locked the door and began my preparations. I checked every lock, every light, every corner of the store. I made sure the radio was on the correct station, that the bathroom keys were in my pocket, that I knew exactly where everything was in case I needed it quickly. At 10:47 p.m., the first sign appeared. The fluorescent lights began to pulse slowly like a heartbeat. The radio static grew louder, resolving into voices speaking in unison, chanting words I could not understand. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in as many seconds, my breath misting in the suddenly frigid air. At 11 p.m., the woman in white dress appeared at pump 7, but this time she was not alone. Dozens of entities surrounded the building, the women in white, shadow figures that seemed made of smoke, things that moved on too many legs, and others I could not quite focus on, as if my mind refused to process what my eyes were seeing. They did not circle the building tonight. They just stood there waiting. At midnight, all the lights went out. But this darkness was different from before. This was absolute, consuming. The kind of darkness that existed before the universe began. My phone's flashlight did nothing. The beam simply stopped a few inches from the phone, absorbed by the darkness like water into sand. I stayed behind the counter, my hands gripping the edge, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then the voices began. Marcus. My mother's voice. Marcus, honey, where are you? I need you. Marcus. My father's voice, angry as it had been the day he left. Get out here and face what you have done. Marcus, please. My younger sister's voice. She would be 16 now, almost an adult. I am scared. Why did you leave us? But I did not have a sister. the lies mixed with truth, memories twisted with fabrications, all designed to disorient me, to make me question what was real. At 1 a.m., I felt my way to the bathrooms and locked the doors by touch. Immediately, the scratching started, but tonight it was on both doors simultaneously, and tonight the voices that called out were not strangers. "Marcus, it is Jennifer. Something happened at my station. I need help. Please, you have to let me in. Marcus, this is Tom. Margaret is hurt. We need to use your phone. Open the door." Marcus, Rebecca's voice. Emily came back. The real Emily. "She is here, but something is wrong. I need you to open this door right now." I walked away, my hands over my ears, trying to block out the voices, but they followed me, seeming to come from inside my own head. At 2 a.m., the lights flickered 3 times. I closed my eyes and began to count. But this time, counting was not enough. The things that moved through the store during those 30 seconds touched me. Cold fingers traced my face. Hot breath whispered in my ears. Something heavy pressed against my back, as if trying to push me forward, toward the storage room. When I reached 30 and opened my eyes, I was no longer behind the counter. I was standing directly in front of the storage room door, and the door was open. Inside, I could see light. Real light, warm and golden like sunshine through clean windows. I could hear sounds, children laughing, music playing, the murmur of conversation. It looked like a summer day, like a park or a backyard barbecue. A figure appeared in the doorway, a woman middle-aged and kind-faced, holding out her hand to me. "Marcus," she said softly, "you look so tired. Why do you not come inside and rest? Just for a moment. You deserve a break." I stared at that outstretched hand, at the warm light beyond, at what looked like peace and safety and everything I had been missing for 2 weeks. "This is the choice," Daniel Torres's voice said from behind me. I turned to find him standing near the counter, his face settled into its most human configuration. "You can keep fighting, keep standing guard, keep sacrificing everything for a world that will never know what you did for it. Or you can step through that door and find peace." "That is not peace," I said, though my voice shook with doubt. "It is a trap, is it?" The kind-faced woman in the doorway smiled. "How can you know unless you try? Perhaps we have been the good ones all along. Perhaps your rules are the trap, keeping you imprisoned in fear and ignorance." I looked back at Daniel. "You said I would be offered a choice. What are my options?" "It is simple," he said. "Step through the door and see what is really on the other side. Or close the door, follow the rules, and live forever with the doubt of what you might have missed. That is not a choice. That is just another test. Everything is a test, Marcus." Daniel moved closer. "The question is whether you trust what you have been told or what you can see with your own eyes. That door looks like salvation. The rules feel like a prison. Which one is the truth?" I thought about everything I had learned over the past 2 weeks. About Rebecca losing her daughter but staying at her post. About Joseph and Margaret and Tom and Jennifer, all of them continuing to stand guard despite the cost. About the man in the black suit, who had told me that home was closed to these entities, that they would say anything, offer anything, to break through. "I know what you are," I said to the woman in the doorway. "You are not offering me peace. You are offering me oblivion. You want me to step through that door so you can take my place, so you can use me to break down the barrier from this side." The woman's smile froze. "You do not understand." "No, you do not understand." I grabbed the storage room door. "I choose the rules. I choose the duty. I choose to stand guard even if I never know what I am really guarding against." I slammed the door shut. The moment it closed, the lights came back on. The warmth returned to the air. The entities outside the windows vanished as if they had never been there. Daniel Torres stood near the counter, and for just a moment his face showed something that might have been respect. "You chose correctly," he said. "Most do not. What would have happened if I stepped through? You would have become one of us. Part of the door itself, forever reaching out to the next guardian, offering the same choice. That is what happened to Daniel Torres. That is what happens to everyone who falls for the final test. So you are not Daniel Torres?" I am wearing his face, speaking with his voice animated by what remains of his consciousness. But the real Daniel? He is part of the door now. Part of the barrier. A warning to future guardians. The thing wearing Daniel's face walked toward the exit. "You have passed the 14th night, Marcus. The cycle resets now. In 2 weeks you will face this test again, and again, and again. Until eventually you either break or become something more than human. What do you mean, more than human? Daniel paused at the door, his hand on the handle. Ask Rebecca about Emily. Ask her the whole truth about what her daughter became. Then he was gone, dissolving into the pre-dawn darkness. The rest of the night passed in silence. No more tests, no more voices, no more entities pressing against the windows. It was as if passing the 14th night had bought me a reprieve, a moment to breathe before the cycle began again. When Rebecca arrived at 6 a.m., she found me sitting at the counter, exhausted but intact. She looked me over carefully, checking for signs of something I could not name. You passed, she said finally, relief evident in her voice. Barely. Daniel said I should ask you about Emily, about what she became. Rebecca set down her clipboard and leaned against the counter. For a long moment she said nothing, just stared out at the desert as the sun began to paint it in shades of gold and red. Emily did not just change when they took her, she said finally. She became something necessary, something important. She turned to face me. Do you remember the man in the black suit? The one who told you about the thin spots and the barriers? Yes? That was Emily. I stared at her, unable to process what she had just said. But the man was an illusion, a form that would not frighten you. Emily exists between worlds now, part human and part something else. She maintains the barriers from the other side, working to keep things from breaking through. She is the reason this place still stands, why the rules still work. But you said she did not recognize you. She does not remember being my daughter, Rebecca said, and her voice finally cracked. That part of her is gone, sacrificed to become what was needed. But she remembers her purpose. She remembers why she has to keep standing guard just from the other side of the door. The weight of this revelation settled over me. So when you refused to open the storage room door, when you followed the rules even as you heard her screaming, I was allowing her to become what she needed to be. Opening that door would have pulled her back into our world completely, would have undone her transformation. She would have been my daughter again, but the barrier would have failed. Everything we have worked for, everything 7 stations full of guardians have sacrificed would have been lost. Rebecca wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. That is the real cost of this job, Marcus. Not just standing guard, but being willing to sacrifice what you love most for the sake of something greater. Emily made that sacrifice. I made that sacrifice. And someday you might have to make it too. I thought about the warning from the other Marcus, about someone I cared about being taken into the storage room, about having to choose between the rules and saving them. What if I cannot make that choice? I asked quietly. Then you break, Rebecca said simply, and someone else has to take your place. That is how it has always worked. I drove home as the sun climbed higher, painting the desert in harsh daylight that made everything look normal and ordinary. But I knew better now. I understood what lay beneath the surface of reality, what pressed against the barriers every night, what waited for any sign of weakness. Over the next 2 weeks, I fell into the rhythm of the job. The nights were still filled with strange occurrences, but they felt almost routine now. The woman in white dress appeared and disappeared. The bathrooms echoed with scratching and voices. The storage room knocked in its rhythmic patterns. Daniel Torres made his nightly appearance at 2:22 a.m., trying different approaches to convince me to surrender my post. But I held firm. I followed the rules. I maintained my position. On my 21st night, something new happened. A car pulled into the parking lot at 3:17 a.m., during the quiet hours between the major tests. A young man got out, maybe 18 or 19, looking lost and scared. He stumbled toward the door and I could see blood on his shirt. He pounded on the glass. Please help me. There was an accident. My girlfriend, she is still in the car. I need to call an ambulance. Every instinct screamed at me to open the door to help this injured kid, but something held me back. I grabbed the phone behind the counter and called 911, keeping my eyes on the young man. There is an injured person at the desert stop on Route 375, I told the dispatcher. Send an ambulance. The young man kept pounding on the glass. Why are you not letting me in? Please, I need help right now. I hung up the phone and grabbed a first aid kit from behind the counter. I went to the door but did not unlock it. Instead, I held up the kit so he could see it. The ambulance is coming, I called through the glass. Where is your car? Where is your girlfriend? He pointed vaguely toward the highway. Out there. Please, we do not have time for this. Just let me in so I can use your phone. I already called for help. Show me your car. It is too dark. You cannot see it from here. He pulled at the door handle frantically. Please, she is dying. I looked past him, scanning the parking lot and the highway beyond. There was no car. No accident. No girlfriend. You need to leave, I said firmly. The ambulance will be here soon. The young man's expression changed. The fear and panic melted away, replaced by something cold and calculating. You are smarter than you look, Marcus. His form began to shift, becoming less solid, more shadow than substance. But we will find your weakness eventually. Everyone has one, even you. He dissolved into the darkness just as I heard sirens in the distance. The ambulance arrived 10 minutes later, finding nothing but an empty parking lot and a confused night clerk who had reported an emergency that never existed. I did not tell Rebecca about this incident. I was starting to understand that some tests were personal, designed specifically for me, and talking about them would only give the entities more information to use against me. On my 28th night, my second 14th night, the test was different. This time, when the storage room door opened, I did not see a peaceful summer day. I saw my apartment, my actual apartment, exactly as I had left it that evening. And sitting on my couch was my mother. She looked older than I remembered, more tired. She was holding a photo album, tears streaming down her face. Marcus, she said, looking up at me. Where have you been? Why have you not called? I have been so worried. My mother and I had not spoken in over a year. We had a falling out over my decision to drop out of college, over my lack of direction, over 1,000 small disagreements that had built up into one massive wall between us. Mom, I whispered, come home, honey. Please. We can fix this. We can fix everything. Just step through and come home. I wanted to believe it was real. Every fiber of my being wanted to walk through that door and reconcile with my mother, to heal that wound that had been festering for so long. But I remembered Rebecca's words. They know your fears, your desires, your regrets, and they will use all of it against you. If you are really my mother, I said, my voice shaking, then you know what we fought about. Tell me what started our last argument. The woman on the couch hesitated. Does that really matter now? What matters is that we make things right. Tell me. Marcus, do not do this. Just come home. Tell me what we fought about, or I am closing this door. The woman's face twisted with frustration. You are making a mistake. You are throwing away your last chance to fix this. I grabbed the door. You are not my mother. I slammed it shut. This time I felt the impact reverberate through the entire building. The lights flickered. The radio screeched with static. Every window rattled in its frame. It felt like the barrier itself had absorbed the shock of my refusal. When everything settled, Daniel Torres was standing near the counter again. That was a good one, he said, and he sounded almost impressed. Using your mother, using your guilt. Most people break on that test. How did you know about my mother? I demanded. We know everything about you, Marcus. Every memory, every regret, every secret shame. We have been watching you since before you were born, waiting for the right moment to use you. He moved closer. But you keep surprising us. You keep choosing the hard path, the lonely path. Why? I thought about that question, really thought about it because someone has to. I said finally, because if I do not stand here, something worse will happen. Because Rebecca lost her daughter, and Joseph lost years of his life, and Jennifer lost her brother, and I will not let their sacrifices be meaningless. Daniel studied me for a long moment. You are becoming dangerous, he said softly. Not to us, but to yourself. You are starting to believe the rules matter more than your own humanity. That is how people like Rebecca end up. Alive but hollowed out, nothing left but duty. Is that supposed to scare me? It is supposed to warn you. There is a difference between being a guardian and becoming a martyr. Do not lose yourself in this job, Marcus. Do not sacrifice your humanity just to prove you are strong enough to stand guard. He left, and I was alone with those words echoing in my mind. The weeks blurred together. 28 nights became 42. 42 became 56. Each 14th night brought a new test, a new choice, a new temptation. They showed me my father, reconciliation and acceptance. They showed me wealth, success, everything I had failed to achieve in my 23 years. They showed me love, friendship, belonging, and each time I closed the door. But Daniel's warning haunted me. Was I losing myself to this job? Was I becoming like Rebecca, still breathing but no longer fully alive? On my 63rd night, I met the other guardians properly. It was not a 14th night. Just an ordinary Tuesday when 6 cars pulled into the parking lot at 2 a.m. Rebecca, Joseph, Jennifer, Margaret, Tom, and 2 others I had never met, a young woman named Sarah and an older man named Robert, all climbed out and walked toward the store. I unlocked the door, confused. What is going on? Is something wrong? Nothing is wrong, Rebecca said. We just decided you have been alone long enough. We are here for a guardian meeting. They filed in, and for the next hour we sat around the small tables and talked. Not about the entities or the rules or the tests, but about normal things. Robert told jokes that were terrible but made us laugh anyway. Sarah shared photos of her dog, a golden retriever named Max. Jennifer complained about traffic in Las Vegas. Margaret talked about her garden. For 1 hour, we were not guardians standing against the darkness. We were just people, ordinary people, sharing coffee and conversation in a rundown gas station in the middle of nowhere. When they left, Rebecca stayed behind for a moment. You have been doing this for 9 weeks now, she said. That is longer than most people make it. I wanted you to see that you are not alone in this, that there are others who understand. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. Marcus, there is something else you should know. In 3 weeks, you will face your 100th night. That is a milestone. It means you have proven yourself capable of long-term guardianship. It also means the test will change. Change how? They will stop trying to trick you or tempt you. Instead, they will start trying to recruit you. She saw my confusion and continued, You have become too strong to break easily. So they will try a different approach. They will offer you knowledge, power, the ability to see beyond the barrier. They will try to convince you that you belong on their side, that you would be more useful as one of them than as a guardian. But I would never say never, Marcus. Some of our best guardians have been turned. They did not think it would happen to them either. She put a hand on my shoulder. Just be prepared. The 100th night is when you decide what kind of guardian you want to be. Someone who simply follows the rules, or someone who truly understands what we are protecting and why. The next 3 weeks passed in growing anticipation. I found myself paying closer attention to the entities, trying to understand them rather than just avoiding them. The woman in white dress was not random in her appearances. She showed up on nights when the barrier was weakest. The knocking in the storage room followed patterns that corresponded to lunar cycles. Even Daniel Torres's nightly visits had a rhythm to them, an ebb and flow that matched something I could not quite identify. On my 98th night, the man in the black suit returned. He walked in at 1:30 a.m., ordered his black coffee, and sat at the same table as before. But this time, after an hour of silence, he stood and approached the counter. You have done well, Marcus, he said. His silver eyes reflected the fluorescent lights like mirrors. Better than we expected, honestly. You have passed every test, resisted every temptation, maintained the barrier without fail. Who are you really? I asked. Rebecca said you were Emily, but you do not look anything like the photos I have seen. I am many things. Emily is one of them. But I am also others who have made the same choice she did, who have become part of the barrier itself. He leaned against the counter. We exist in the spaces between, neither fully in your world nor in theirs. We are the mediators, the translators, the ones who keep the rules working. Why tell me this now? Because on your 100th night you will be offered a choice. Not a test, but a genuine choice. You have proven yourself worthy of joining us, of becoming something more than a simple guardian. His expression was unreadable. We need people like you, Marcus. People who are strong enough to hold the line, but flexible enough to understand that not everything on the other side is evil. Some things are just different. Some things are trying to go home, trying to escape from beings even worse than themselves. So the woman in white dress, the things in the storage room, they are refugees, some of them. Others are predators. Still others are simply lost, confused, caught between worlds through no fault of their own. He straightened. The question you will face on your 100th night is whether you want to keep seeing the world in simple terms, our side versus their side, or whether you want to understand the complexity of what really exists beyond the barrier. And if I choose complexity, then you join us. Become part of the barrier itself. Sacrifice your humanity to become something that can truly protect both worlds, yours and theirs. He left before I could ask more questions, disappearing into the night as silently as he had arrived. The 99th night was completely silent. No woman in white dress. No knocking in the storage room. No Daniel Torres at 2:22 a.m. It was as if the entities themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what I would choose. On my 100th night, I arrived at the desert stop to find it transformed. The fluorescent lights had been replaced with soft golden illumination that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The shabby interior looked somehow cleaner, newer, more substantial. The radio behind the counter played music instead of static, real music, beautiful and haunting. Rebecca was waiting inside, but she was not alone. Emily stood beside her, wearing the form I had come to know as the man in the black suit. But now I could see the resemblance to her mother in the set of her jaw, the shape of her eyes. "Hello, Marcus," Emily said with that voice that seemed to come from somewhere other than her mouth. "Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice?" "You always have a choice. That is the fundamental truth we have been trying to teach you." She gestured to the counter. "Tonight, you choose what kind of guardian you want to be. Rebecca said you were going to offer me the chance to become like you. Part of the barrier itself." "That is one option," Emily agreed. "Join us. Sacrifice your individual humanity to become part of something greater. You would maintain the barrier from the inside, see both worlds clearly, understand the truth of what we are protecting and why. What is the other option? Stay as you are. Remain human, remain a guardian in the traditional sense. Follow the rules, stand watch, but never truly understand what you are guarding against or why it matters." Rebecca finally spoke. "There is no wrong answer, Marcus. Both choices serve the barrier. Both are necessary." I looked between them, trying to understand what they were really asking. "If I join you, what happens to my life? My mother, my friends, my future?" "You give them up," Emily said simply. "Just as I did. Just as everyone who has made this choice has done. You become a tool, a function, a necessary piece of a machine that keeps reality from tearing apart. You lose your name, your memories, your identity, but you gain understanding, purpose, power. And if I stay human, you keep yourself, but you keep your ignorance too. You will spend the rest of your life, however long that is, standing guard against things you will never fully understand. You will make sacrifices without knowing if they matter. You will lose people you love and never know if their suffering had meaning. It was the choice the entities had been building toward all along, not trying to break me, but trying to elevate me, trying to recruit me to their level. I thought about everything I had learned in 100 nights, about Rebecca's sacrifice, about Joseph's dedication, about Jennifer's determination, about all the ordinary people who stood guard at lonely outposts, following rules they did not understand, protecting a world that would never know their names. "I choose to stay human," I said. Emily tilted her head. "Why? You have seen what I can do. You know the power that comes with understanding. Why would you choose ignorance?" "Because someone has to," I said, echoing the words I had spoken to Daniel Torres weeks ago. Someone has to stand guard without understanding, has to follow the rules just because they are rules, has to believe that duty matters more than knowledge. If everyone becomes like you, if everyone transcends their humanity to become part of the barrier, then who are we protecting? What is the point of maintaining the barrier if there are no normal humans left to benefit from it?" Rebecca smiled, and I saw pride in her expression. "That is the right answer." "There is no right answer," Emily corrected gently. "But it is your answer, and that is what matters." The golden light began to fade, the music grew quieter. "You will continue as you have been, Marcus. Standing guard, following the rules, maintaining the barrier without fully understanding it. And someday, years from now, you will train someone new. You will give them the rules, watch them struggle, see them grow. And maybe you will offer them this same choice." The desert stop returned to its normal shabby appearance. The fluorescent lights flickered back on. The radio resumed its static hiss. Emily was gone, leaving just Rebecca and me in the empty store. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now you continue," Rebecca said simply. "The 100th night is just another milestone. The job continues. The barriers must be maintained, the rules must be followed. But Marcus, you have passed something important tonight. You have proven that you understand what we are really doing here, which is staying human in the face of the inhuman, maintaining our identity, our individuality, our limitations, even when we are offered the chance to transcend them. That is the real guard we keep, not against the entities trying to break through, but against the temptation to stop being ourselves." She left, and I began my shift. The rest of the night passed normally. The woman in white dress appeared at pump 7 and disappeared at dawn. The bathroom scratched and whispered behind locked doors. The storage room knocked its rhythmic pattern. Daniel Torres came at 2:22 a.m. and left when I refused him. Everything was as it had always been. But I was different now. I understood my place in this strange ecosystem of guardians and barriers, of entities and rules. I was not special. I was not chosen. I was just someone willing to stand in a gas station in the middle of nowhere, following rules I would never fully understand, protecting a world that would never know my name, and that was enough. As the sun rose on my 101st night, I poured myself a cup of coffee and watched the desert come alive with light. Somewhere out there, 6 other guardians were finishing their shifts at 6 other stations. Somewhere beyond the barrier, Emily and others like her were maintaining the seal from the other side. Somewhere in the future, new guardians would take our places, carrying on the work we had started. The desert stop sat exactly where it had always been, a shabby gas station on a lonely stretch of highway. To anyone driving past, it was just another roadside convenience store, unremarkable and forgettable. But I knew better, and now, so do you.